Tonight, a national disgrace. Union leaders condemn Grangemouth's owners as 500 workers are sent redundancy letters.
The unions are furious that the politicians have failed to save the jobs here. After a century of refining oil at Grangemouth, it will close by the end of June, ripping the heart out of industrial Scotland.
Also making the headlines, Scotland's housing emergency. More people are sleeping in the streets of our biggest cities every single night. A man who deliberately drove his car over his estranged wife is jailed for 7 years.
And tonight's sport comes live from Celtic Park as Brendan Rodgers' men look to go 13 points clear at the top of the table as they welcome Dundee.
I'm John Mackay. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. Scotland's only oil refinery will close by the end of June. Redundancy letters have gone out to 500 workers at Grangemouth. The Unite Union describes it as a national disgrace. Petro Ineos announced plans to close the plant in September and say the process of safely transitioning the site from a refinery to an import terminal is underway. Our political editor, Colin Mackay, is at Grangemouth. So, Colin, what's been happening today?
Well, I got a call this afternoon telling me that the redundancy letters had started going out to staff here at Grangemouth. There's about 500 directly employed by Petro Ineos, and over the last few months they've been having one-to-one meetings with management since that announcement of the plans to close it were made in September. Now, of the 500, 435 are being made redundant. Most of them will be voluntary redundancies, but about 30 of them will be compulsory redundancies. Only 65 will be kept on to staff the import terminal. That will be bringing fuel in from abroad to be sent round petrol stations all around Scotland. Now, today's moves have been met with anger by Unite the Union. They've been pushing the government to step in and save these jobs.
It's not just the refinery jobs we're talking about here. We're talking about 2,800 jobs potentially across Grangemouth. £4.3 billion lost to the local economy. It's just not acceptable in this current time. We have a plan, we have the ability to create sustainable air fuel in this country that we could redistribute across the airports in the UK. Why we're not doing it, that's down to the UK and Scottish governments.
So, Colin, that's the union view. What other reaction is there tonight?
Well, local Labour MP Brian Leishman was elected last year on promises of saving jobs here. He's furious at the news today.
Labour leadership said in the general election campaign, we will, and I quote, step in, invest hundreds of millions of pounds into Grangemouth and we'll build Grangemouth for the future. We'll step in and we'll save jobs. That was just rhetoric. Where is the delivery? And that is what I've been consistently pressing for from government colleagues, and they've been found wanting.
A huge number of people are going to lose their jobs. It's going to have an effect on the local area. It's going to have an effect right across the central belt of Scotland. And yet here we are, we've got a void with nothing properly in place. And so I extend my sympathy to the workers, but I have to say my first reaction is one of huge anger that we're in this position.
Now, just before Christmas, workers from Grangemouth marched on the Scottish Parliament in a fight to save their jobs, and the First Minister then raised the prospect of keeping the plant going with the Prime Minister when they met at the British-Irish Council in Dalmahoy, again just before Christmas. But there's been no reaction so far from the UK government tonight. We have, though, heard this from the Deputy First Minister.
Just last week, the Chancellor stood up to make a call for more growth in our economy. She talked about a third runway at Heathrow, as well as a focus on sustainable aviation fuel. Well, that could be invested in at Grangemouth, keeping the refinery open, and could be part of our long-term ambition. But we need the UK government to honour its commitments, to care about Grangemouth, to make the investments, and to ensure that we protect these jobs.
Redundancies will start in the next few weeks as they start to take the plant apart. Petro Ineos have made their plans clear. They say this plant is losing millions of pounds every week, and now they're focusing on the process of safely transitioning from a refinery to an import terminal. They say that's already underway, although the whole process could take about 5 years. Now, by the end of June, more than 100 years of oil refining here will stop. It'll take a big chunk out of Scotland's GDP. Petronians talk about a safe transition, but Unite the Union say for workers, there's no just transition.
Colin at Grangemouth, thank you. The number of children living in temporary accommodation in Scotland has reached its highest level in over 20 years. The number of people sleeping rough is also on the rise, with more and more people not offered temporary accommodation or suitable homes. Charities say it shows the housing system in Scotland is broken. Our reporter Amy Flett joined one team in Edinburgh supporting those sleeping rough every night.
We are going to go up to the Royal Mile, and then we're going to go down to Princes Street.
3 times a day, 7 days a week, the Streetworks team at Simon Community Scotland head out to support those sleeping on the streets. Currently, around 60 people are sleeping rough in Edinburgh. The first people Hannah and Fergus encounter are in a group. They're offered tea and extra supplies.
Do you guys want a tea?
The aim is to build relationships with those sleeping on the streets and offer support.
Well, the temperature is about 5 degrees tonight, but really it feels more like minus temperatures. And earlier we saw pretty heavy downpours, so you can only imagine the difficulties facing those sleeping rough tonight.
What we're here today was kind of typical of what we hear normally, which is that they are rough sleeping this evening. There wasn't temporary accommodation available for them this evening, or that, for example, we met a new person this evening, and so we were just trying to get some information from that person. So it's very complex, kind of a mix of reasons as to why people are on the streets.
And the charity says the situation is getting worse.
There's over 5,000 people in Edinburgh that are currently experiencing homelessness, so it is getting worse, and our support therefore is needed more than ever.
Today, figures released by the Scottish Government showed that between April and September last year, the number of households assessed as homeless or at risk of homelessness had increased by 4% to 17,500. Meanwhile, rough sleeping is on the rise. Those reported as sleeping rough in the 3 months prior to application had increased by 25%. And perhaps most starkly of all, the number of children living in temporary accommodation was at its highest level in 20 years at over 10,000.
The Parliament declared a housing emergency back in May last year, but far too many of those children who were in temporary accommodation in May last year are still there today, and they need urgent action.
At an affordable housing development in Prestwick today, the Housing Minister said the figures were concerning.
They're challenging and they're still far too high, but we've been taking a number of actions, obviously increasing the budget by £200 million to £768 million to look at the supply.
We'll see you at the hub tomorrow.
But for those currently sleeping rough and the thousands of children without a home to call their own, it's a long way off until they'll see the benefits of those actions. Amy Flett, STV News, Edinburgh.
A man who tried to kill his estranged wife after subjecting her to years of domestic abuse has been jailed for more than 7 years. William Budge drove a car straight at Sandra in Edinburgh's Muirhouse Parkway before doing a U-turn and driving over her again. Our senior reporter Gordon Cree was in court, and a warning, you will see video of the incident.
In the aftermath of the attack in April last year, footage of it did the rounds on social media. You can see William Budge's car hitting Sandra, dragging her along and then running over her. As a relative in the cream coat went to help her, Budge turned his car around in traffic and then drove over his victim again, leaving her with life-threatening injuries.
Your conduct in the attempted murder was caught on video and is quite horrifying to watch. The callousness and cruelty of your acts are astonishing. There can be no doubt that you showed complete indifference as to whether or not your conduct killed her. It is remarkable that your wife was not in fact killed and you'd be facing a charge of murder.
In a statement, Sandra Budge said,
I believe this sentencing does not encourage other women to come forward with cases of domestic abuse. As a society, we've repeatedly heard that violence against women will not be tolerated, yet this low sentence flies in the face of that sentiment. The outcome today also does not inspire trust or confidence in the justice system, especially to those who have experienced domestic violence or are still trapped in dangerous domestic circumstances.
Budge appeared today by video link from jail. He was wearing a red prison-issue sweatshirt and sat impassively throughout the hearing. His advocate, Mark Stewart KC, told the court that Budge recognises and accepts his guilt, but cannot offer any rational explanation for his conduct. The court previously heard this attack came just 3 weeks after Sandra left Budge and moved into a flat in Muirhouse. That day, the 62-year-old went to her new address, tried to force her into his car and take her phone. He shouted, "She's effing embarrassed me." Budge pled guilty to attempted murder, as well as an assault some years earlier where he put his hands round her throat, and several years of domestic abuse, including shouting and swearing, pushing her onto a bed and calling and texting her excessively. As well as being sentenced to 7 years and 4 months in jail, he's been given a non-harassment order, preventing him contacting his victim in any way for 15 years. Gordon Cree, STV News, Edinburgh.
Big changes which should be improving the lives of young people who go through the care system aren't happening fast enough, according to a report criticising the Scottish Government and local authorities. It's 5 years since a commitment was made to the promise. But despite criticism, ministers say they remain committed, announcing additional support for families. Our political correspondent Ewan Petrie reports.
The promise has just not been met so far.
For Oisin and others with experience of the care system, reform is not happening quickly enough.
We cannot allow our children and young people to be failed again and again, because the support is out there for not just our children and young people, but for local authorities, for services, for key organisations in the third sector, for example. But they just need the courage to reach out and ask for that support.
It's 5 years since the promise was launched, following an independent review.
We will keep the promise.
The commitments received cross-party support. However, 5 years into the 10-year programme, the Oversight Board has concluded Scotland is not halfway towards keeping its promise. In fact, it says for some in the care community, the promise has already been broken. It also accuses the Scottish Government of taking too long to produce a delivery plan.
Lots of people have a part to play in this change programme, but we have to admit that some people have more power than others. And the Scottish Government are the ones that can be ensuring that budgets are there for support services to be able to do the job that they're there to do to support children and families.
Charities welcome the call for more accountability.
It was really helpful in that it highlights what we've been saying for quite a long time. You know, there's been a lot of talk, there's been a lot of discussion about what to do about the promise, and highlighting that actually what we need now is action. And you know, as an organisation that delivers advocacy, we firmly believe that now is the time for action on advocacy.
If there's more that we have to do or further that we have to go in terms of showing that leadership, then I'm always willing to listen and take stock of that and, you know, take action moving forward.
Can you look care experienced young people in the eye though and say that you feel the Scottish Government has been doing enough up to now?
I absolutely can. We have made a striking commitment to this. We want to ensure that all care experienced children in Scotland grow up loved, safe and respected. Transformational change does not happen overnight, but we are making all the efforts and giving this real priority to try to ensure that.
The report believes the promise can still be kept by 2030, but it warns there is no time to waste. Ewan Petrie, STV News.
The cost of the replacement for Scotland's largest prison, Barlinnie, has soared to almost £1 billion, 10 times the original estimate. HMP Glasgow will also open years later than originally planned. Defending the increased cost, the Justice Secretary described it as a critical investment. The Scottish Conservatives say ministers are squandering taxpayers' money on a scandalous scale. Here's our chief reporter, Sharon Frew.
Scotland's largest prison opened in 1882. Today, Barlinnie is outdated and overcrowded. Its population this morning was 1,383. This is an artist's impression of parts of its modern replacement.
The price is difficult for people to stomach, I would imagine. It's a prison and it's not a popular decision to build prisons, so I personally thank the government for that, because it's going to make my life and the staff's life a lot easier in a modern facility.
In 2014, the predicted cost of the new prison was £100 million. By 2023, that estimate had increased to £400 million. Now the cost of the construction contract is over £600 million. The addition of VAT and land acquisition brings the total cost of the project to almost £1 billion.
The price is on a par with the costs of prison build in England and Wales. We have seen significant inflation in the construction industry. That is a result of Brexit, COVID, labour and material shortages.
The new prison to be built in Glasgow's Provan Mill was previously set to open in November next year. The new delivery date is now 2028.
It absolutely does need to be replaced, and it should have been replaced on budget and on time. Yet again, this is an SNP Scottish Government that has failed to do either of those things, and the consequences are disastrous.
The Victorian-built Berlini is no longer fit for purpose. This hall is one of several accommodation blocks, and it houses between 280 and 300 men.
The new one is purposefully designed to make sure that all the facilities are there for both challenging offending behaviour, supporting people and building resource in people, and try and get them to cope with life back in the community.
That remains 3 years away, so won't help the current capacity issues. Next week, legislation comes into force that will see hundreds of prisoners released early as part of longer-term measures to tackle overcrowding. Sharon Frew, STV News, Berlini.
Now, Ronnie is at Celtic Park tonight with all the sport.
Your window to sport. C.R. Smith sponsors STV Sport.
Yes, a very good evening, live from Celtic Park, where Brendan Rodgers' men will look to go 13 points clear of rivals Rangers at the top of the Scottish Premiership tonight as they welcome Tony Docherty's Dundee. It's fair to say, though, the build-up for the Parkhead club to this match has been pretty much dominated by off-field transfer inactivity at the club. Brendan Rodgers insisting his squad is now lighter after only Jota and Jeffrey Sloop were added to his squad. Well, despite being fewer in numbers, Rodgers admits they will have to be at their best this evening against the Dundee side, who last time out produced a thrilling 3-3 draw at Dens Park last month. Rodgers admits, although he does have fewer numbers to work with, they need to be at their best this evening.
Yeah, listen, there's no doubt that the squad is lighter. There's no doubt, but no, I just we'll work hard. We'll focus in on this next 4 months, a really exciting period for us. Get into these games, and we'll have a tighter squad, but also a squad that is improving and developing. I think that's sometimes what gets missed, especially when you have younger players. I think there's still improvement in this squad.
Well, with Kyogo now gone, the baton is well and truly passed to Adam Ida as Celtic's only senior recognised striker. The Irishman has 3 goals in his last 2 matches, and he says he is relishing the challenge of being Celtic's main man.
Yeah, it's exciting for me. It's what I wanted. It's what I came to Celtic in the first place. Even last year when I came, I wanted more minutes, and I've come back again in the summer. And now I've got a big responsibility to take, and I'm ready to take it. I think when you're playing football, you want to play as many minutes as you can, and I'm ready to take that role now.
Well, let's take a look at the Scottish Premiership table tonight ahead of this only fixture in the league this evening. Celtic, as you can see, top of the table, 10 clear of Rangers, 13 with a win this evening, obviously. Add to that, if they do win tonight, Celtic would only be 9 wins away from securing the title. Dundee in 10th, as we mentioned, but it's so tight down at the bottom of the table, a win could move them within a point of the top 6.
Kick-off here at Celtic Park tonight is 7:45. And final news from us this evening comes for the world of rugby. Scotland coach Peter de Villiers says the squad must have a winning mentality as they get set for their blockbuster Six Nations clash with Ireland on Sunday. It's not makes good reading in terms of past meetings between the two sides. Scotland losing the last 10. That includes the last time out at Dublin, where the Irish went on to claim back-to-back Six Nations titles.
You know, a team that's been consistently up there with the top teams in terms of the world rankings, so it's always great excitement for us to play Ireland. And you know, I think we've over the years now grown consistently against them, so it's time for us to go and look for a win against them, and it's important for us to go into the game with that kind of mindset.
Your window to sport. CR Smith sponsors STV Sport.
And that is all your sport this evening.
Enjoy, Ronnie. Now, Sean has the weather.
An icy start to the day will give way to a series of oohs and ahs. TUI sponsors STV Weather.
Very good evening to you. A lot of quiet weather for the foreseeable. High pressure around, but because the high pressure will be to the east of us, drawing in colder air over the next couple of days. Nothing overly significant yet, but there will be a return to some overnight frost, and we'll start to see a little bit of a frost developing tonight across central and southern parts into Lanarkshire, the borders, Dumfries and Galway. Temperatures -1, -2 degrees. Not quite as chilly in the northwest, a bit more of a breeze around here, but at least the showers we've seen during this afternoon clearing away, so mostly dry with clear spells. Tomorrow, dry, plenty of sunshine, not much to say about the weather map at all. The winds will be light for most of us, a little bit breezier still across the Hebrides, but light over inland parts, and temperatures 6 or 7 degrees Celsius, so hopefully in that afternoon sunshine, not feeling too bad. But a cold night to come tomorrow night. I think tomorrow night will be one of the colder nights, -2, -3, maybe -4 in some spots of Lanarkshire again, and in Dumfries and Galway, East Ayrshire. There's a lot of dry, bright weather to come on Friday. A little bit more clouds starting to spread into the east, and what we'll see is more clouds spreading in through the weekend. But the further west you are, Col, Tyree, Mull, probably Ardnamurchan, Oban, Lorne area, will hang on to the best of the sunshine throughout the weekend here. We're further away from that cloud that comes in from the North Sea, but we'll hang on to cold and frosty nights. As we head further south and east, South Lanarkshire, for example, we see a lot more cloud coming in Saturday and Sunday, but what that does do is it picks up those overnight temperatures slightly. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV Weather.
And that's it. Thanks for watching. Good night.